Hello there and welcome to Miss Yusuf's English class. In this video, we are going to study An African Thunderstorm by David Rubadiri. Before getting into the poem, however, let's get some background notes on the poet. David Rubadiri was born in 1930 in Malawi. He studied in Uganda and Cambridge. In 1964, when Malawi gained independence, Rubadiri was appointed Malawi's first ambassador to the United States of America and to the United Nations. He left government in 1965 when he and President Hastings Banda had a disagreement, but he later returned to the Washington embassy after Banda's removal from power. Let's read An African Thunderstorm. From the west, clouds come hurrying with the wind, turning sharply here and there like a plague of locusts, whirling, tossing up things on its tail like a madman chasing nothing. Pregnant clouds ride stately on its back, gathering to perch on hills like sinister dark wings. The wind whistles by, and trees bend to let it pass. In the village, screams of delighted children toss and turn in the din of the whirling wind. Women, babies clinging on their backs, dart about in and out madly. The wind whistles by, whilst trees bend to let it pass. Clouds wave like tattered flags flying off to expose dangling breasts, as jagged, blinding flashes rumble, tremble, and crack, amidst the smell of fired smoke and the pelting march of the storm. Right, before we go into a section-by-section analysis of the poem, it's very important right off the bat to identify the very, very emotive words, very, very vivid imagery, very, very rich diction used in the poem. The speaker obviously wanted to evoke emotion in us and a reaction in us, and to create a very, very clear, vivid picture in our mind about the storm that is gathering. You're going to find that there's a lot to talk about in terms of the diction, in terms of the figures of speech, in terms of the mood that each line or each section of the poem conjures up in our mind. Okay, it's a very rich poem, it's a very vivid poem, it's a very beautiful poem. So let's get into it, and I hope you appreciate this poem as much as I do. Section by section. Right, from the west, clouds come hurrying with the wind. Right? Immediately in the second line, the word hurrying, the speaker immediately gives us the sense of urgency, a sense of rush. Right, and we are looking up at the west and we can see clouds come in. It is hurrying, it appears to be hurrying, and it's being carried by a wind. Of course, for wind to be carrying a cloud in a hurry, you could sense immediately at the very beginning of the poem, at the very onset of the poem, that drama is going to unfold. Turning sharply here and there like a plague of locusts. Right, turning sharply here and there, very erratic pattern of movement, very, very unexpected directions that these winds and these clouds are moving on. And you have your first simile, like a plague of locusts. A few things to talk about here. So first of all, figure of speech, simile. What two things are being compared? The clouds being carried on the wind compared to a plague of locusts. Now, if you have to look at the plague of locusts and the effectiveness of the imagery, let's talk about locusts, right? First of all, when locusts migrate, or when they travel in these really large numbers. So large, in fact, that when they take flight, they could actually block out the sun from a certain region, from a certain area, right? That's how large their numbers are. And of course, when they are taking flight, they could actually, in their vast numbers, block out the sun, causing a moment of darkness, right? Just like these heavy clouds being carried on the wind are blocking out the sun. So that's the first comparison. The second reason the simile is effective is because when locusts land on an area, whether it's plantation, vegetation, any area that they land on, because locusts now would feed on whatever they land on, when they take flight again, they would have decimated whatever they landed on. So that entire region, that entire area that they had settled on for that moment would be completely destroyed. That harvest would have been completely destroyed. That field would have been completely destroyed because of the large numbers that would have consumed what it was that they had landed on. And so in the same way, you're looking at the destructive nature of these locusts as they land on whatever they are landing on, whatever they are alighting on. And in the same way, this heavy wind and these heavy clouds, the strong winds and the heavy clouds, when they come in with the rain, with that incredible force of rain and hail, if that's what they're carrying. We know this in South Africa, especially. We recently, I don't know which year you're going to listen to this, watch this video or listen to me speak, but we are now in COVID lockdown, and a few months ago we had in Pietermaritzburg the storm that was so severe that hail the size of tennis balls were falling from the sky, and it was to be in lockdown and to have that kind of severity of a storm. You're worrying about your vehicles, you're worrying about your homes, you're worrying about your windows, your possessions, you're worrying about the people on the road. Not that there were many, but whoever would have been going home from work. It took place just around 4 o'clock, which would have been peak hour traffic. Okay, all of these forces of nature, as much as they have the power to replenish and nurture, they also have the power to destroy. Right? So plague of locusts here, when they land on a piece of land or a farm or a field, they would consume, they would eat up whatever. That's why it's a plague, right? It's something that destroys and then takes life and claims life. In the same way, when the rain falls, it'll be heavy, forceful rain. It may be accompanied by hailstones. It may be accompanied with lots of other things that could destroy the area on which it is falling. Even the lightning could cause incredible damage. Let's move on. Whirling, tossing up things on its tail. Whirling, all right, you've got a bit of an onomatopoeia here, mimicking the sound of the wind, that whistling sound. Tossing up things on its tail like a madman chasing nothing. Right, so this wind now, it's starting to become cyclonic in nature, and again, you don't know where it's going to, or what pattern it's going to follow, or where it's going to land next. And it resembles a madman chasing nothing, your second simile of the poem. So let's look at the effectiveness. What two things are being compared? Again, you're comparing the wind, the strong wind and these heavy rain clouds to a madman chasing nothing. A madman, right? Again, very erratic, very unpredictable. There is no control over movement. There is no deliberate thought process that goes into what a madman would do or say. Okay, psychology students will have a lot to argue about. Let me know in the comments, by the way. Yeah, so there appears to not be a pattern to what a madman would do, or his behavior would be very unpredictable and very erratic. And in the same way, these clouds are being compared to a madman. You just don't know what is going to happen next. Very volatile, potentially violent, aggressive. All of these descriptors could be applied to both the madman and the storm as it's building up, tossing things up on its tail, anything that can be moved. Anything light, maybe litter, maybe straw, hay, whatever is in its path. If it's light enough, it will be carried around and it'll be following the pattern and the pathway of the storm. Pregnant clouds ride stately on its back, right? So now you have a personification comparing the clouds that are arriving on the back of the wind to being pregnant, right? Of course, because of its life-giving quality, because of the fact that it's carrying something very heavy and it's about to deliver it. That's the rain, right? But also because pregnancy results in the delivery of life, right? Or the implication is this, the insinuation is that when you are pregnant, you give birth to life. It's not always that point, that way, of course. But the image here is that it is carrying life in its weight, and when it delivers the life, something's going to develop and grow. And the message here, or the effectiveness here, is that when the clouds deliver their rain, the rain is going to obviously replenish the land. And it's going to photosynthesize, and it's going to help vegetation, produce, grow. And that's the life form that these storms are actually giving birth to. So pregnant here, very effective in the way that it's going to, in the future, give rise to life, new development, and something that's going to grow and give back in the same way that pregnant, not women, essentially female members of the species, all species, would obviously be pregnant and then deliver life. In the same way, the clouds now are pregnant with this water that they're going to deliver, and it's going to give life. Ride stately on its back. Okay, you've got here this metaphor giving you the image that the clouds are human, not necessarily human, but you could say it's a metaphor or personification. It's given this image of majesty, very regal image, riding stately on its back with a lot of dignity. The wind, pregnant, heavy with water, appears to be riding on the back of the wind. Okay, so the winds are simply almost like these servants to the clouds, and they're taking them wherever they need to go. Right, so the metaphor here, the pregnant clouds, the clouds are being compared to people, to humans, who are riding very majestically, very regally, with a lot of dignity on the back of the winds, and they are going to follow the route of the winds and deliver their life force wherever the wind decides to drop them. Right, they're gathering to perch on hills like sinister dark wings. Another simile here. Right, all of the winds had appeared at the beginning of the poem to be very erratic, but you find now that they're all following a common course, and they are gathering together, right? So all of the winds are now merging, they're gathering together, and they're so dark and they're so heavy with water, and you get this image of sinister dark wings. Right, of course they're not perching on the hills, they're not actually landing on anything, but because it's such a vast body of clouds have gathered together at this point, they appear to be sitting on or perching on a hill, but they're just placed there. Of course, now the clouds would be very low in the sky, so it would look like they're almost touching the hills. Right, like sinister dark wings, another simile comparing those clouds to dark, sinister wings, very ominous, very portentous. They have this threat of intimidation, right? Because of the darkness. And if you see the image that I've used, it does have a very ominous look to it. Okay, drama is about to unfold. Something very evil, something very dark is about to unfold here. And storms in a lot of cultures are actually considered to be sent down by some evil force. Not in all cultures, but there could be an association there that could be mentioned, how a lot of cultures associate storms and lightning and thunder with black magic or with witchcraft or with some sort of evil message that they bring with them. Right, so that's another metaphor there, comparing the dark clouds to sinister dark wings. Right, the wind whistles by and trees bend to let it pass. So you've got again here an onomatopoeia, the whistle sound. It mimics the sound of the wind as it rushes by. And we know from earlier that it's very erratic, but now, as I told you in the previous line, it seems to be all the winds to be following a common course. And the trees bend to let it pass. Now here you have almost a hierarchy in nature, where the trees, as majestic as they are, as strong as they would be, they actually acknowledge a more powerful or more superior force. So of course it's not a physical action, it's not a conscious decision that the trees are making to bend and allow the wind to pass. It's just that the wind is so strong that it is brushing through these trees, and it's pushing the leaves and the branches aside and passing through, makes it look like the trees are bowing in acknowledgement to the superior force of the wind, of course traveling at very high velocity, and of course with a goal to reach the clouds that are perched on the hills that look like sinister dark wings. The trees allow them to pass, because the trees, I think, if they are rigid and if they do not bend, they would break, they would be uprooted. And so again, the acknowledgement of a superior force. The winds appear to be bending to allow the wind that it acknowledges to be more powerful than itself to pass. Right, you have the human element now being introduced. In the village, children screams of children with delight, right? The image of children now screaming in happiness and joy. There's a storm coming, everything is very exciting to them. Children, of course, are very naive, very innocent. They're not altogether aware, cognizant of the danger that a storm will pose a threat to their lives in terms of the very heavy rain that could fall, or the lightning that could fall, or hailstones that could fall, or a wind that could carry them away or hurt them in any way, or carry something that is dangerous toward them. Children will not be too aware of these dangers. So to them, it's just a very exciting lightning storm that's happening in the sky. They are screaming in delight. And amidst the screaming, there's a tossing and turning of the din that's already being made by the wind. So the children are exacerbating that sound. They are emphasizing that sound. They are reinforcing that almost craze that is developing up in the sky. It's also developing on the ground with the children who are screaming in joy at the approaching storm. Right, women, babies clinging on their backs, dash about in and out madly. Right, another reference to the word madly, just like madman earlier. Right, very unpredictable, very volatile, out of control. Okay, but now with no apparent, obvious purpose. Okay, women with babies clinging on their back. Here you have the adult representation in the poem. We had children in the first in the previous line. Women now, they are adults, and they are a lot more aware of the danger that the storm poses and the threat that it poses to their life. So they are now can see the wind coming from the west. They can see the clouds gathering. They can hear the wind. They can hear this pandemonium building up. And so they, even though they have their babies clinging on their backs, they're darting about, bringing in their other children, bringing in their possessions, trying to protect their possessions, because they are very much aware of the danger that the storm will bring. Completely opposite to the children who are screaming and playing in the previous line. Right, like I told you, madly is another reference to insanity, craziness. All right, that is a common theme in this poem. Dash about in and out. You're going to find that this poem has got 1-word lines, 2-word lines, 3-word lines, 4-word lines, 5-word lines. If you look at this this particular section, madly is 1 word, and that's a whole line. Dash about is a 2-word line. In and out is a 3-word line. Babies clinging on their backs is a 5-word line. You're going to find that this poem does not follow an exact pattern or an apparent pattern. It's very erratic. It's like longer lines, shorter lines, very much in keeping with that mood and that tone that is set by the gathering storm. Right? The storm, as the speaker has told us, is very unpredictable, very erratic. There is no pattern to it. In the same way, the poem follows a very uneven, very erratic pattern as well. Right, the wind whistles by whilst trees bend to let it pass. You've got a repetition of the earlier line where the trees are actually being pushed aside, the branches are pushed aside. If there's any fruit on the trees, they're being pushed aside because the wind is so powerful. The velocity and the speed and the strength that it's coming at the trees with, the trees now are bending in the wind, acknowledging it and allowing it to pass as a more powerful force. Very aware, not aware in its human in a human way, in a cognizant way, in a conscientious way. But the tree, if it's not moved this way and that way, if it's rigid, like I said earlier, it would be uprooted. A tree could be destroyed if it did not allow the wind to pass. So again, you have a repetition of that line. The onomatopoeia here is repeated. Right, again, the human element. Clothes wave like tattered flags flying off to expose dangling breasts. Right, so powerful is the wind now that's gathering and the storm that's gathering that clothes are actually being flung off. Right, and of people's backs, literally here in the poem. And this image here, for some reason, gives me the idea of a white flag, similar to the tree earlier that surrendered to the wind and allowed it to pass. Here it's almost like human beings are waving a white flag in acknowledgement that the storm is a lot more powerful than human power. Okay, and we have to take cover, take shelter, protect our possessions, and allow the storm to do whatever it wants to. And it's only when it's over that we can come out and assess the damage. So this is the image that conjures up here. It's not necessarily the authorial intent, but that's the image that I personally get in my head of a white flag. Human beings acknowledging and surrendering to the storm as a superior force, just like the trees earlier. And it's so powerful that it's actually making clothes fly off people's bodies. Jagged, blinding flashes rumble, tremble, and crack. A beautiful image here, right? The storm has built up, and now the thunder and the lightning is starting to emanate. So, what happens when a storm takes place? So, all of the winds have carried all of the clouds together, and we saw in the earlier line, they appear perched on a hill. Now, when these different clouds come from different directions, being carried by winds from different directions, when the clouds merge, okay, it's not a peaceful assemblage, right? It's actually quite a lot of conflict in terms of science. The molecules are bashing against each other. There's a lot of friction taking place among the clouds there. And every time there is friction, it produces a lightning flash and a thunder that roars with it, okay? A lightning flash and a roar of thunder is produced at the same time. But because light travels faster than sound, very often we will see the lightning before we hear the thunder. However, it is produced at the same time. Every time there is friction with the molecules up in the air, that's what happens. And that's how a storm develops. So now we have reached that pinnacle. We've reached that point where the clouds are merging, and you're getting this rumble and this tremble and this crack. The rumble of the clouds, the tremble and the crack of the lightning, and the thunder as it's being produced. Jagged, blinding flashes. Jagged, very much in line with that erratic nonconformist pattern, right? As you can see from this image, very, very unpredictable. Nothing is following a straight line. Very much like the madman earlier, very much like the haphazard, well, not haphazard, but very erratic, volatile movement of the wind and the clouds earlier, right? You have here these blinding flashes. Okay, some of the friction is so strong and so powerful that the flashes of lightning can actually white out everything for a second, and then the thunder, of course, will be very, very powerful as it reaches us. Amidst the smell of fired smoke and the pelting march of the storm, right? So the storm takes place no matter what's going on, no matter what destruction it's causing, if it's putting out people's fire for cooking, if it's the lightning is striking trees or homes and setting those things on fire, right? This march will continue, a pelting march, the rain pelting, not just falling, not just hitting, pelting, destroying, okay, very much like the locusts earlier in the poem. This pelting of the rain on the floor, beating it with force, with strength, with power. Remember that if the wind was so powerful and the clouds were so powerful, and in the previous line the lightning and the thunder was so powerful, the rain is going to be very powerful as well as it falls onto the ground, such that it's been given the quality of pelting. And it continues the march now as it follows its course from the beginning, as we have witnessed, until the end when the storm is over. Right, that brings us to the end of this poem. All credit to the artists and the owners of these images. I do not own any of them. I found them on Google and I used them because I think they're very beautiful. None of these images belong to me. I found them all and they belong to whomever they belong to. Right, thank you for joining me for our analysis of an African thunderstorm. I hope to see you again soon. Until the next time, take care of yourself and be safe.